What's up guys, Sal here. So given the extensive inside information we've been getting for the past few months, we already know what to expect from the Galaxy S22 Trio in terms of features and hardware. But there is a big mystery surrounding the chipset that the handset is expected to come with. We know for certain that markets like the United States, China and India will have a Snapdragon variant of the S22. But what about the rest of the world? Well, we have some inside information as well as a statement from Samsung about this whole issue which reveals some big things. We also have a price leak of all the S22 variants. But before that, let's address what's going on with the Exynos variants of the Galaxy S22 and why there is good news for a lot of you. You see, a couple of days ago we discussed that Samsung cancelled the Exynos 2200 event. They didn't inform the media or the users why it was cancelled. It's very unusual for companies to cancel the events. Unless there's a big problem, OEMs don't cancel events like this. Then we got information that despite having AMD GPU, the Exynos 2200 is performing worse than the competition. If you remember, I mentioned that Exynos regions shouldn't be worried that they would get an inferior S22. Well, the reason I said it is because we got information that Samsung has finally decided to give the users what they've been asking for years, and that is a Snapdragon equipped Galaxy flagship for worldwide. This tipster has got information that Samsung has decided to equip all the Galaxy S22 variants with Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 chipset worldwide. This means regions like Europe, Asia, the Middle East and more will now get the Snapdragon variant of the Galaxy S22. But then Samsung responded. One of Samsung's representatives told the Korean media that there is no problem with Exynos 2200's production and performance. They'll launch it at the time of launching a new Samsung smartphone, which many believe is the S22. The representative said the new GPU is expected to resolve the problems of the Exynos 2100 and they intend to sharpen their competitiveness by loading the AMD GPU. So basically, Samsung said the Exynos 2200 isn't cancelled, it's just postponed. But the thing is, Samsung didn't mention why the event was postponed, nor did they specifically mention the event would take place next month. I mean, like I've said, companies don't postpone the events unless there is a big problem. And I think the upper management at Samsung isn't satisfied with the performance of the Exynos 2200. We have plenty of benchmarks telling us repeatedly that the Exynos 2200 isn't up to the mark. AMD GPUs work great at higher clock speeds, but the chipset is running hot at those speeds, which means Samsung still has some ironing out to do. And it's possible they've decided to delay it further than releasing a subpar product. And that's the reason Samsung may not release the Exynos variant of the S22. We'll get Snapdragon variants all over the world. Thankfully, more tipsters are now coming out to say this is indeed the case. Samsung has indeed cancelled the Exynos 2200 for the S22. Instead, they'll use the chipset in future Samsung devices. When more than one source tells the exact same thing, the likelihood of that rumor turning out to be true goes exponentially high. So the bottom line, Europe, Asia and more will get the S22 with Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, a Samsung flagship where they're not getting an inferior handset compared to the US counterpart. Moving on, we have a price leak of all the S22 variants for both the US and Europe. It shows that all these smartphones could debut with a $100 price hike compared to their predecessors in the US. In Europe, the prices could remain the same as the S21 lineup. Another tipster from South Korea also says that the prices will remain the same as the S21. If you ask me, I also think that prices will remain unchanged even in the US because the hardware for the most part remains the same, which means it will take almost the same amount of money to produce these handsets as the S21. Of course, do consider subscribing for all the latest updates on the S22, and as always, I'll see you tomorrow. Peace out.